The morning sun painted the private airport terminal in golden hues as David Williams walked through the glass doors, his 8-year-old daughter Maya skipping beside him. He wore his favorite weekend outfit, comfortable jeans, white sneakers, and a navy blue hoodie with his old college logo faded across the chest. To anyone watching, he looked like any other dad taking his daughter on a trip. Maya clutched her purple backpack filled with coloring books, tablets, and snacks for their journey to Atlanta. She had been talking about this business trip for weeks, excited to fly on Daddy's big airplane, and maybe visit the aquarium if time allowed. David smiled watching her enthusiasm. These moments with his daughter were precious, especially since work often kept him busy running his companies. They approached the sleek white aircraft sitting on the tarmac. The jet's engines gleamed in the morning light, and its interior promised luxury that most people only dreamed about. David had worked hard for 15 years to build his aviation business from nothing. Starting with a single small plane, he now owned a fleet of private jets that served clients across the country. Captain Rodriguez was doing his pre-flight checks when he spotted them approaching. He waved with a warm smile. "Good morning, Mr. Williams. Beautiful day for flying." David returned the greeting while Maya ran ahead, eager to board the plane she considered her second home. Inside the cabin, everything was pristine. Cream-colored, leather seats faced each other around polished wooden tables. The carpet was spotless and fresh flowers sat in crystal vases. David had designed every detail to make passengers feel welcome and comfortable. This wasn't just a business for him, it was his pride and joy. A young flight attendant named Lisa was arranging magazines on the side tables. She was new to the crew, hired just 2 weeks ago by the charter management company that handled his fleet operations. David hadn't met her before, but he trusted his managers to hire good people. Lisa had impressive credentials. She had worked for major airlines and came with excellent recommendations. As David and Maya settled into their seats, Lisa approached with a professional smile that seemed a bit forced. Her eyes quickly scanned David's casual clothes, taking in his relaxed appearance. Something shifted in her expression, though she maintained her polite demeanor. "Good morning," she said, her voice crisp and businesslike. "I'll need to see your boarding passes and identification." David reached for his wallet, but Maya was already pulling out her juice box from her backpack. In her excitement, she fumbled with the small straw, and before anyone could react, apple juice splashed across the pristine white leather seat beside her. "Oh no," Maya gasped, her eyes immediately filling with tears. "I'm sorry, Daddy. I didn't mean to." David quickly moved to comfort his daughter. "It's okay, sweetheart. Accidents happen." He looked around for napkins, ready to clean up the mess himself. He had cleaned up countless spills over the years. This was nothing new for any parent, but Lisa's reaction was immediate and harsh. Her professional smile vanished completely. "Are you kidding me?" she snapped, her voice rising. "Do you have any idea how much these seats cost?" David looked up, surprised by her tone. "I'm sorry about that. Let me help clean it up." He reached toward the spill, but Lisa stepped between him and the seat. "Don't touch it," she said sharply. "You'll make it worse. Do you even realize what you've done? This is premium Italian leather. One seat costs more than most people make in a month." Maya shrank back into her seat, confused and frightened by the angry woman. David felt his protective instincts kick in, but he kept his voice calm and steady. "I understand you're concerned about the damage. We'll certainly take care of any cleaning costs." Lisa laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Take care of it? Do you have any idea what that means? This isn't some bus seat that you can wipe down with a paper towel. This requires professional cleaning, maybe even replacement." Other passengers were starting to board now, and they couldn't help but notice the tension. An elderly businessman paused in the aisle, watching the scene unfold. A young couple exchanged worried glances as they found their seats. "Look," David said quietly, trying to de-escalate the situation. "I'm sure we can work this out reasonably. These things happen, especially when traveling with children." "These things happen," Lisa's voice grew louder. "Maybe where you come from, but not on flights like this. This is a premium service for people who understand how to behave appropriately. The word stung, and David felt a familiar knot forming in his stomach. He had heard variations of these comments too many times in his life. The assumptions, the judgments based on appearance, the immediate conclusion that he didn't belong in spaces like this. I need to see proof that you can actually pay for this damage, Lisa continued, her hand extended. Credit cards, bank statements, something that shows you're not just going to disappear when the bill comes. David took a deep breath. Maya was watching him carefully, and he knew his response would teach her something important about how to handle unfair treatment. I don't think that's necessary right now, he said calmly. Let's focus on getting the seat cleaned up properly. It absolutely is necessary, Lisa shot back. I've seen this before. People get access to these flights through connections or some kind of arrangement, and then when something goes wrong, suddenly they can't afford to pay for damages. Well, not on my watch. Captain Rodriguez appeared in the cabin doorway, drawn by the raised voices. His eyes immediately found David, and confusion crossed his face as he took in the scene. But before he could speak, Lisa waved him off. I've got this handled, Captain, just a passenger situation. The captain hesitated, clearly wanting to say something, but his radio crackled with a message from air traffic control. He threw one more, concerned look at David before reluctantly heading back to the cockpit to handle the urgent communication. Lisa turned back to David with renewed authority. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to pay for professional cleaning of this seat right now, or you and your daughter are getting off this plane. I won't have passengers who can't respect the aircraft or take responsibility for their actions. That seems unnecessary, David replied, his patience wearing thin but his voice still controlled. We're willing to handle this responsibly. Responsible? Lisa scoffed. Responsible would have been watching your child properly in the first place. Responsible would be having the means to pay for damages without making a scene. But instead you're sitting here in your... She gestured dismissively at his clothes. Trying to convince me that you belong on a plane like this. The elderly businessman spoke up from his seat. Excuse me, miss, but this seems like an overreaction. It's just a small spill. Lisa whirled around to face him. Sir, I appreciate your concern, but I'm handling this situation. This is about maintaining standards and ensuring that all passengers understand the level of service we provide here. Maya tugged on David's sleeve, her voice barely a whisper. Daddy, why is she so mad at us? What did we do wrong? David's heart broke a little hearing the confusion in his daughter's voice. He pulled her closer, speaking softly. Sometimes, sweetheart, people make assumptions about others without knowing the whole story. It's not right, but it happens. Lisa overhead and rolled her eyes. Don't turn this into something it's not. This is simply about accountability and respect for property. If you can't handle that responsibility, then maybe you should consider flying with airlines that are more suitable to your situation. The words hung in the air like a challenge. David felt the familiar burn of injustice, the same feeling he had experienced countless times while building his business empire. The assumption that he didn't belong, that success like this wasn't meant for someone who looked like him. But Maya was watching and other passengers were listening. This moment would teach his daughter something important about dignity, grace under pressure, and how to respond when the world treats you unfairly. David made his choice. We'll wait for the captain to return, he said simply. I think there might be some misunderstanding here that needs to be cleared up. Lisa's face flushed red with anger as she pulled out her phone. That's it. I'm calling security right now. This has gone on long enough. Her fingers moved quickly across the screen, and David could hear her speaking in sharp, clipped tones to someone on the other end. Yes, I need security at Gate 7 immediately. I have passengers who are being disruptive and have damaged aircraft property. They're refusing to take responsibility, and I need them removed from the flight. Maya pressed closer to her father, her small hand gripping his arm tightly. Daddy, are we in trouble? She whispered, her voice trembling. David could see tears forming in her 8-year-old eyes, and it broke his heart that his daughter had to witness this kind of treatment. No, sweetheart, David said softly, stroking her hair. We're not in trouble. Sometimes adults make mistakes when they don't understand a situation completely. He kept his voice gentle and reassuring, even though inside he felt a storm of emotions building. The other passengers were now fully aware that something serious was happening. The elderly businessman who had spoken up earlier shook his head in disapproval. A young mother traveling with her teenage son looked uncomfortable, whispering something to her child. Near the back of the plane, a woman in a business suit had quietly started recording with her phone, sensing that this situation was escalating beyond normal customer service issues. Lisa finished her call and turned back to David with a triumphant expression. Security will be here in 5 minutes. I suggest you gather your things and make this easy on everyone, especially your daughter. Ma'am, David said, maintaining his calm tone despite the situation spiraling out of control. I think you're making this much bigger than it needs to be. We've offered to pay for any cleaning costs. There's no need to involve security over a simple accident. Simple accident? Lisa's voice rose again. This is about respect and understanding your place. People like you think you can just walk onto flights like this and act however you want. But there are standards here. There are expectations. The phrase, people like you, hung in the air like poison. Everyone in the cabin heard it, and the uncomfortable silence that followed spoke volumes. The young mother looked shocked, while the businessman's face darkened with disapproval of Lisa's words. David felt that familiar ache in his chest, the same feeling he'd experienced in boardrooms when investors questioned his capabilities, in restaurants when hostesses assumed he couldn't afford the bill, in stores where security followed him around. But he had learned long ago that responding with anger would only confirm their prejudices. I'm not sure what you mean by that, David said quietly, but I think we should wait for the captain to return. Perhaps he can help us resolve this situation. Lisa laughed bitterly. The captain is busy with important matters. He doesn't have time to deal with passengers who can't follow basic rules of conduct. And frankly, I don't think you understand how serious this is. She pulled out a tablet and began typing furiously. I'm filing an official incident report right now. Damage to aircraft property, disruptive behavior, refusal to comply with crew instructions. This is going in your permanent record with the airline industry. Good luck getting on another premium flight after this. Maya tugged on David's sleeve again. Daddy, what's happening? Why won't she listen to you? Her innocent question cut through the tension in the cabin. Here was a child who couldn't understand why an adult would treat her father with such disrespect and hostility. Sometimes, baby girl, David said, choosing his words carefully. People make judgments about others before they know all the facts. It's not right, but it happens. The important thing is how we respond to it. But you're being nice to her, Maya said, confusion clear in her voice. Why is she still being mean? Before David could answer, Lisa interjected harshly. I'm not being mean, young lady. I'm doing my job in protecting this aircraft and its other passengers. Your father needs to understand that actions have consequences. The woman with the business suit who had been recording spoke up from her seat. Excuse me, but I've been watching this whole situation, and it seems like you're being unnecessarily aggressive over what was clearly an accident. Lisa spun around to face her. Ma'am, I'd appreciate it if you'd stay out of this. This is between me and these passengers who have damaged airline property and refuse to take proper responsibility. I saw what happened, the woman continued, firmly. A child accidentally spilled some juice. That's not grounds for calling security and making threats, and some of the things you've said are completely inappropriate. I'm following proper protocol, Lisa insisted, but her voice wavered slightly. When passengers cause damage and can't provide proof of ability to pay, we have procedures to follow. The elderly businessman stood up from his seat. Young lady, I've been flying on private aircraft for over 30 years. And I've never seen a flight attendant treat passengers this way. You're being completely unreasonable. Sir, please return to your seat, Lisa said, her authority starting to crack under the pressure of multiple passengers questioning her actions. I don't need passengers telling me how to do my job. Maybe you do, said the teenage boy, surprising everyone with his quiet but clear voice. My mom and I were recording this whole thing. You've been really unfair to them. Lisa's eyes widened as she realized that multiple passengers had been documenting the confrontation. You can't record on this aircraft without permission. That's a violation of privacy policies. Actually, said the businesswoman still holding her phone, we're in a public space and we have every right to document what we consider to be discriminatory behavior. The word discriminatory seemed to hit Lisa like a physical blow. This is purely about property damage and appropriate conduct. This has nothing to do with anything else. But even as she said it, everyone in the cabin could hear the uncertainty in her voice. The pattern of her comments, her assumptions about David's ability to pay, her dismissive attitude, it all painted a clear picture that was becoming impossible to ignore. David watched the situation unfold, around him with a mixture of sadness and resignation. He had hoped that by 2025 these kinds of encounters would be rare, but here he was again, having to prove his worth to someone who had already decided he didn't belong. Lisa, he said gently, using her name for the first time. I understand. You're trying to do your job, but I think this situation has gotten out of hand. When the captain returns, maybe we can all sit down and work this out like adults. Don't patronize me, Lisa snapped. But there was less fire in her voice now. The reality of multiple passengers challenging her, recording devices capturing everything, and her own escalating behavior was starting to sink in. Just then, heavy footsteps echoed in the aircraft's entryway. 2 security guards in navy blue uniforms appeared at the cabin door, their expressions serious as they took in the tense scene before them. We got a call about disruptive passengers, the first guard said, his eyes scanning the cabin and landing on David and Maya. Lisa straightened up, trying to regain her authority. Yes, thank you for coming so quickly. These passengers have damaged aircraft property and are refusing to cooperate with crew instructions. The second security guard looked around the cabin, noting the other passengers' expressions and the obvious tension in the air. What exactly happened here? The child spilled juice on the seat, Lisa explained, pointing at the small stain on the leather. The father refuses to provide proof that he can pay for professional cleaning, and they've been argumentative and disrespectful throughout this entire process. The first guard looked at the tiny stain, then at Maya cowering behind her father, then back at Lisa with obvious confusion. This is what you called us about? A juice spill? It's not just about the spill, Lisa insisted, but her voice was getting weaker. It's about accountability and maintaining standards. David stood up slowly, his hands visible and his movements calm. Officers, my daughter accidentally spilled some juice. We immediately offered to pay for any cleaning costs. I'm not sure why this escalated to calling security. The guards exchanged glances. They had responded to many calls over the years, and this didn't feel like a typical disruptive passenger situation. The father seemed calm and cooperative. The child was clearly scared, and the other passengers looked more upset with the flight attendant than with the family. Maya peeked out from behind her father. Are you going to take my daddy away? She asked in a small voice that made everyone in the cabin feel a pang of sympathy. The moment hung in the air, pregnant with possibility and consequence as everyone waited to see how this confrontation would resolve. The tension in the cabin was so thick you could cut it with a knife. The 2 security guards stood in the narrow aisle, looking between Lisa and David, trying to figure out what was really going on. Maya clutched her father's hand even tighter, her small body trembling as she watched the uniformed men. Just then, Captain Rodriguez's voice crackled over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll have a slight delay while we handle a quick administrative matter. Thank you for your patience. Lisa's confidence seemed to return with the security presence. Officers, as I explained, these passengers have damaged expensive aircraft property and refuse to provide adequate assurance they can cover the costs. The father has been argumentative and I need them removed so we can proceed with the flight. The first security guard, a middle-aged man with kind eyes, looked down at Maya and then back at David. Sir, can you tell us your side of what happened here? David kept his voice calm and measured. My daughter accidentally spilled some juice on the seat. We immediately apologized and offered to pay for any cleaning. I'm not sure why the situation escalated to this point. He's lying, Lisa interrupted. He's been disrespectful and evasive about payment from the beginning. I've seen this before. People who get access to these flights through connections, but can't actually afford them when problems arise. The second guard, younger but clearly experienced, looked around the cabin. The other passengers were watching intently, their faces showing various degrees of discomfort and disapproval. "Ma'am, what exactly makes you think he can't pay for cleaning?" Lisa faltered for a moment. "Well, look at him. His clothes, his attitude. People who regularly fly private don't act this way or dress so casually." The businesswoman who had been recording held up her phone. "Officers, I've captured this entire interaction. The flight attendant has been making inappropriate assumptions and comments from the beginning." "That's not true," Lisa protested, but sweat was beginning to form on her forehead. "I'm just trying to maintain professional standards." Heavy footsteps echoed from the front of the aircraft as Captain Rodriguez finally returned from handling his radio communication. The moment he stepped into the cabin and saw the scene, security guards, upset passengers, his colleague Lisa looking flustered, and David standing calmly with Maya, his face showed complete confusion. "What's going on here?" Captain Rodriguez asked, his eyes immediately finding David. "Is there some kind of problem?" Lisa rushed to explain before anyone else could speak. "Captain, I called security because these passengers damaged the aircraft and won't provide proof they can pay for repairs. I was handling it according to protocol." Captain Rodriguez looked from Lisa to David, then to the small juice stain on the seat, then back to Lisa. His confusion deepened. "Lisa, are you aware of who you're speaking to?" "I don't care who he thinks he is or who he knows," Lisa said firmly. "Standards are standards, and I won't compromise them for anyone." The captain walked closer, his voice dropping to a concerned whisper. "Lisa, this is David Williams. He owns this aircraft. He owns this entire company." The words hit the cabin like a thunderbolt. You could actually hear people gasp. The elderly businessman's eyebrows shot up. The young mother covered her mouth, in shock. The teenager who had been recording whispered, "Oh my God," to his mother. Lisa's face went completely white. She stared at Captain Rodriguez as if he had just spoken a foreign language. That's not possible. You're mistaken." Captain Rodriguez pulled out his flight tablet and quickly navigated to the passenger manifest. "David Williams, owner and CEO of Skyline Private Aviation. This is his personal aircraft, tail number N7749DW. The DW stands for David Williams." He turned the tablet screen toward Lisa, showing David's professional headshot next to his passenger information. Even in his business suit in the photo, it was unmistakably the same man standing before them in jeans and a hoodie. Lisa's legs seemed to give out slightly, and she grabbed the back of a seat for support. But he's dressed like..." She couldn't finish the sentence as the full weight of her mistake crashed down on her. The first security guard looked at his partner and shook his head slowly. "Sir," he said to David, "we're very sorry for this misunderstanding. We'll be going now unless you need us to file a report." David shook his head gently. "That won't be necessary, officers. Thank you for responding so quickly." As the security guards left, the cabin fell into an uncomfortable silence. Other passengers were looking at their phones, and David could see some of them searching his name online. Within moments, their expressions changed as they found articles about his company, his net worth, his charitable work, and his rise from a single father working multiple jobs to building a multi-million-dollar aviation empire. The businesswoman, who had been recording, looked at her phone screen, then at David, then back at her phone. "You're the David Williams who started Skyline Aviation? The one who built the scholarship program for single parents?" David nodded modestly. "Yes, ma'am." The elderly businessman stood up from his seat and extended his hand. "Mr. Williams, I owe you an apology. I've been flying your aircraft for 2 years through the charter service, and I had no idea. You've built something remarkable here." "Thank you," David replied, shaking his hand. "But there's nothing to apologize for. You spoke up when you saw something wrong, and I appreciate that." Maya tugged on her father's shirt. "Daddy, why didn't you tell the mean lady who you were?" David knelt down to his daughter's level. "Sometimes, sweetheart, It's important to see how people treat others when they think there's nothing to gain from being kind. It tells you a lot about who they really are. Lisa had been standing frozen, watching this revelation unfold. Tears were starting to form in her eyes as she realized the magnitude of what had happened. She had not only insulted and struck her ultimate employer, but she had done it in front of witnesses on camera, over a minor accident involving his child. "Mr. Williams," she whispered, her voice barely audible. I had no idea. I'm so sorry. I don't know what to say." David stood back up and looked at her. For a moment, the cabin was completely silent except for the soft hum of the aircraft's systems. Everyone was waiting to see how he would respond. Would he fire her on the spot? Have her arrested for assault? Destroy her career with a phone call? Captain Rodriguez stepped forward hesitantly. "Sir, I want you to know that this behavior doesn't represent our crew or our company values. Lisa is new and I take full responsibility for not briefing her properly about—" David raised his hand gently, stopping the captain mid-sentence. "Captain Rodriguez, you've been with me for 5 years. You're one of the best pilots I've ever worked with, and you have nothing to apologize for." He turned his attention back to Lisa, who was now visibly shaking. "Lisa, what you did today was wrong. The way you spoke to my daughter and me, the assumptions you made, the way you escalated a simple accident into something ugly, all of that was unacceptable." Lisa nodded, tears now flowing freely down her cheeks. "I know, I'm so sorry, I don't know what came over me. I was trying to do my job, but I let my own biases get in the way. There's no excuse for what I did." The young mother in the back of the plane spoke up. "My son got this whole thing on video. It's probably going to go viral once people see it." Lisa's face somehow managed to go even paler. In the age of social media, she knew that her behavior would be seen by millions of people within hours. Her career in aviation would be over before the plane even landed. David looked around the cabin at all the faces watching him. Some showed sympathy for Lisa, others showed anger at her behavior, but all of them were waiting to see what kind of man he really was. This moment would define not just Lisa's future, but would show everyone present what David Williams stood for. Maya looked up at her father with those big, innocent eyes. "Daddy, what happens now?" David took a deep breath. The next words he spoke would change everything. David looked at his daughter's expectant face, then at Lisa's tear-streaked cheeks, then at all the passengers waiting to see what kind of man he really was. The weight of the moment settled on his shoulders like a heavy coat. "What happens now," David said softly to Maya, "is that we remember what Grandma always taught us. When someone makes a mistake, we look for ways to help them learn and grow, not just ways to punish them." Lisa's eyes widened in disbelief. She had expected anger, threats, immediate termination. Instead, she heard something she never anticipated: compassion. The teenage boy in the back whispered to his mother, "Mom, is he really going to be nice to her after what she did?" His mother shushed him gently, but everyone was thinking the same thing. David turned to Captain Rodriguez. "Captain, I'd like to continue with our flight to Atlanta as planned. But first, I think Lisa and I need to have a private conversation when we land." "Of course, sir." Captain Rodriguez nodded, relief evident in his voice. "Should I arrange for alternative crew for the return flight?" "Let's see how our conversation goes first," David replied diplomatically. As the plane prepared for takeoff, Lisa tried to do her job, but her hands were shaking so badly she could barely fasten her own seatbelt. The other passengers watched her with a mixture of pity and curiosity. Some were already posting about the incident on social media, and the story was beginning to spread across the internet like wildfire. The businesswoman who had recorded everything was typing furiously on her phone. "This is incredible," she murmured to herself. David Williams could destroy this woman's career with a single phone call, and instead he's talking about helping her learn and grow. During the 2-hour flight to Atlanta, the atmosphere in the cabin was unlike anything any of them had ever experienced. David spent most of the time coloring with Maya and helping her with a puzzle book, acting as if nothing unusual had happened. Lisa sat in the flight attendant's jump seat, staring at her hands and occasionally wiping away fresh tears. The elderly businessman approached David during the flight. "Mr. Williams, I have to ask, why aren't you angrier about this? That woman treated you and your daughter terribly." David looked up from Maya's coloring book. "Anger is easy," he said quietly. "But anger doesn't change hearts or minds, it just creates more anger." "But she assaulted you," the man pressed. "She called security on you in your own plane. She made racist assumptions." "Yes, she did all of those things," David acknowledged. "And now she has to live with the consequences of those choices. But I have to live with the consequences of my choices too. I can choose revenge, or I can choose to be the kind of person I want my daughter to see me as." Maya looked up from her coloring. "Daddy, remember when I broke Mrs. Johnson's window with my ball? You made me apologize and help fix it, but you still loved me." David smiled and kissed the top of her head. "That's right, baby girl. People can make mistakes and still be good inside." When they landed in Atlanta, the story had already exploded on social media. Videos from multiple passengers were trending on every platform. "Flight attendant mistake" was the top hashtag on Twitter. News outlets were calling David's representatives for comments. Lisa's phone had been buzzing constantly during the flight. Text messages from friends and family who had seen the videos online. Calls from reporters wanting her side of the story. Emails from her charter company management asking for immediate explanations. As the other passengers deplaned, many of them stopped to shake David's hand or take selfies with him. Several mentioned they would definitely be booking flights with his company in the future. The teenage boy asked for an autograph, saying David was way cooler than any celebrity. When the cabin was finally empty except for David, Maya, Lisa, and Captain Rodriguez, David asked the captain to give them some privacy. Lisa sat across from David, looking smaller and more vulnerable than she had seemed during her earlier outburst. Maya was playing with her tablet nearby, occasionally glancing up at the adults. "Lisa," David began gently, "can you help me understand what happened back there? Because the woman I saw today doesn't match the person described in your employment file." Lisa took a shaky breath. "Mr. Williams, I don't have any excuse for my behavior. What I did was inexcusable, and I understand if you want to fire me and press charges." "I'm not asking for excuses," David said. "I'm asking for understanding. Help me see how we got to that point." Lisa was quiet for a long moment, wrestling with emotions she had kept buried for years. "I've been struggling," she finally whispered. "My divorce was finalized 2 months ago. My ex-husband left me with nothing but debt. I took this job because I needed the money desperately, and I was so afraid of making any mistakes that might get me fired." She wiped her eyes with a tissue. "When your daughter spilled that juice, all I could think about was how much it would cost and how my supervisor would react if there was damage on my watch. I panicked." "That explains the concern about the spill," David said. "But it doesn't explain the assumptions you made about me and my family." Lisa's face crumpled with shame. "You're right, there's no excuse for that. I grew up in a small town where people like me didn't interact much with people like you. I had these terrible ideas in my head about who belongs in certain places and who doesn't. I thought I had left all that behind when I moved to the city, but apparently I hadn't." Maya looked up from her tablet. "Why did you think my daddy was a bad person? He helps lots of people." Lisa looked at the little girl, her heart breaking. "I don't think your daddy is a bad person, sweetheart. I was the one who was being bad. I made judgments about him without knowing anything about who he really is." "But that's silly," Maya said with 8-year-old logic. "You should get to know someone before you decide if you like them or not." "You're absolutely right," Lisa agreed, managing a small smile despite her tears. "That was very silly of me." David leaned forward. "Lisa, what you did today was wrong. But I've built this company on the belief that everyone deserves dignity and respect, regardless of how they look or where they come from. If I respond to your prejudice with cruelty, then I become part of the problem instead of part of the solution." Lisa stared at him in amazement. "You're not going to fire me?" "I didn't say that," David replied carefully. "What I'm saying is that I believe people can change if they're willing to do the hard work of examining their own hearts and minds. The question is, are you willing to do that work? Lisa nodded eagerly. Yes, absolutely. I'll do whatever it takes. David pulled out his phone and showed her the trending hashtags. Lisa, this story is everywhere now. Millions of people have seen what happened today. Your name and face are associated with discrimination and prejudice. That's a consequence you'll have to live with. Lisa's face went pale as she scrolled through the comments and news articles. Her career in aviation was effectively over. No airline would hire someone with this kind of public relations nightmare attached to their name. But, David continued, consequences don't have to be the end of the story. They can be the beginning of a new chapter if you're willing to write it. He leaned back in his seat. I'm going to offer you a choice, Lisa. Option 1, I accept your resignation, we part ways, and you face whatever comes next on your own. Option 2, you accept a demotion, take a significant pay cut, and commit to a program that will help you understand the impact of prejudice and bias. Lisa looked up with hope in her eyes. What kind of program? You'll work with the diversity and inclusion consultants who train all my employees. You'll volunteer at community centers in underserved neighborhoods. You'll attend workshops on unconscious bias. And you'll write a public apology that acknowledges what you did wrong and commits to doing better. Maya tugged on her father's sleeve. Daddy, does this mean the mean lady gets to stay? David smiled at his daughter. It means the lady who made mistakes gets a chance to become better, just like we all do when we mess up. He turned back to Lisa. But I want to be clear, this isn't just about keeping your job. This is about becoming the kind of person who would never treat another human being the way you treated us today. Are you ready for that kind of change? Lisa wiped her eyes and looked directly at David for the first time since the truth had been revealed. Mr. Williams, I don't deserve this kindness. But I promise you, I will spend every day proving that your faith in me wasn't misplaced. Outside the plane windows, the Atlanta skyline glittered in the afternoon sun. And inside the cabin, the first seeds of redemption were being planted. 1 year later, the same white aircraft sat on the tarmac at the same private airport, gleaming in the morning sunshine. David walked through the terminal doors again, this time wearing a Navy business suit for an important meeting in New York. Maya, now 9 years old, skipped beside him in a bright yellow dress, chattering excitedly about visiting the city's famous toy store. Daddy, do you think Lisa will be working today? Maya asked as they approached the plane. Over the past year, she had asked about Lisa many times, curious about the woman who had been so mean but was now trying to be better. I'm not sure, sweetheart, David replied. But if she is, I think you'll see that people really can change, when they want to. As they climbed the steps to the aircraft, David reflected on the incredible year that had passed. The story of what happened on this plane had become one of the most shared videos in social media history. It had sparked conversations about prejudice, forgiveness, and second chances in living rooms, boardrooms, and classrooms around the world. The moment they stepped into the cabin, David saw a familiar face, but one that looked completely different from the angry, defensive woman he had encountered 12 months ago. Lisa stood near the front of the plane, wearing her flight attendant uniform with obvious pride. Her posture was confident but humble, and when she saw David and Maya, her face lit up with genuine warmth. Good morning, Mr. Williams. Good morning, Maya, she said with a bright smile. Welcome aboard. It's wonderful to see you both again. Maya ran up to her excitedly. Lisa, Daddy said you've been helping kids like me learn about being kind to everyone. Lisa knelt down to Maya's level, her eyes sparkling. That's right, sweetheart. You and your daddy taught me something very important about treating people with respect, and now I get to share that lesson with other children. David watched the interaction with amazement. The transformation in Lisa was remarkable. Gone was the bitter, defensive woman who had made assumptions based on appearance. In her place stood someone who radiated genuine kindness and humility. Lisa, David said warmly, it's good to see you. How have you been? Better than I ever imagined. Possible, Lisa replied, standing up. Mr. Williams, I can never thank you enough for giving me a second chance. This year has changed my entire life." As they settled into their seats, Lisa began sharing her story. After accepting David's offer, she had thrown herself into the program with complete dedication. The diversity training had been difficult and sometimes painful, forcing her to confront beliefs she had carried since childhood. But it had also been liberating, helping her understand how those beliefs had limited her ability to connect with others. The hardest part, Lisa explained as she served them refreshments, was facing the community service requirement. David had arranged for me to work at a youth center in downtown Atlanta, and I was terrified. I had never spent time in that kind of environment before. Maya listened intently, sipping her apple juice from a special cup, the same kind she had spilled a year ago. "Were the kids nice to you?" she asked. Lisa's face softened with memory. "At first they weren't sure about me. I was this white woman who had been all over the news for being prejudiced. But there was this one little boy named Tyler, about your age, who asked me why I was there." She paused, remembering the moment that had changed everything. "I told him the truth. I said I had been mean to a man and his daughter because of the color of their skin, and I was there to learn how to be better." Tyler looked at me for a long time, then he said, "My mom says everybody deserves a chance to fix their mistakes." David smiled, recognizing the wisdom that often came from children. That must have been a powerful moment. "It was," Lisa nodded. "Tyler became my first friend at the center. He helped me understand things from a completely different perspective. Soon, other kids started trusting me too. I began tutoring them in math and reading, and they taught me about resilience, hope, and forgiveness." The plane was now cruising at altitude, and other passengers were settled in their seats. David noticed that Lisa moved through the cabin with a natural grace, treating every passenger with the same warmth and respect, regardless of how they were dressed or what they looked like. "The public apology was the scariest part," Lisa continued when she returned to check on them. "Standing in front of cameras, acknowledging what I had done wrong, and committing to change, I was terrified people would never forgive me." "But they did?" Maya asked hopefully. "Some did, some didn't," Lisa answered honestly. "And that's okay. I learned that forgiveness isn't something you can demand from people. It's something you have to earn through your actions, not just your words." David had read Lisa's public apology when it was published. It had been raw, honest, and genuinely remorseful. She hadn't made excuses or tried to minimize her actions. Instead, she had taken full responsibility and outlined specific steps she was taking to address her own biases and help others do the same. "What surprised me most," Lisa said, "was how the story inspired other people to examine their own prejudices. I received hundreds of letters from people sharing their own stories of bias and discrimination. Some apologized for their own past behavior. Others shared how they had been victims of similar treatment. The young mother from the original flight had even reached out to Lisa. Her teenage son had written a school essay about the incident, exploring themes of justice, mercy, and personal growth. The essay had won a statewide competition and earned him a scholarship to college. "Lisa," David said, "I have to tell you something. When I offered you that second chance, I wasn't sure it would work. I hoped it would, but I had doubts." Lisa nodded understandingly. "I had doubts too. There were days when the work was so hard, when I had to face such ugly truths about myself, that I wanted to quit. But every time I thought about giving up, I remembered Maya asking me why I thought her daddy was a bad person. I couldn't let that little girl down." Maya beamed with pride. "I'm glad you didn't give up." As the flight continued, Lisa shared more about her journey. She had completed her training program and was promoted to head of customer relations for the entire charter company. Her job now was to ensure that every passenger received the same respectful treatment, regardless of their background. "I've also been speaking at schools and community groups," Lisa said, "sharing my story and helping others recognize their own biases before they cause harm. It's become my mission to make sure no one else goes through what I put you and Maya through." The elderly businessman from the original flight had become one of Lisa's biggest supporters. He had used his connections to help her get speaking engagements at corporate training sessions and university seminars. He told me that watching your response to my behavior taught him more about leadership than any business school ever could, Lisa said to David. As they began their descent into New York, Maya looked out the window at the city below. Daddy, does this mean everyone can change if they really want to? David considered the question carefully. I think everyone has the ability to change, sweetheart, but they have to want it badly enough to do the hard work, like Lisa did. Lisa overhead and smiled. Maya, your daddy is right. Change isn't easy and it doesn't happen overnight. But if you're willing to look honestly at yourself and put in the effort, you can become the person you want to be. As the plane touched down in New York, David reflected on the incredible journey they had all taken. What had started as a moment of ugly prejudice had become a story of redemption that had touched millions of lives around the world. Lisa had not only kept her job, but had found her true calling in helping others overcome their own biases. The video of the original incident was still being shared, but now it was often accompanied by Lisa's transformation story, showing people that change was possible. As they prepared to deplane, Maya hugged Lisa goodbye. I'm proud of you for becoming a better person, she said with the simple honesty of a child. Lisa hugged her back, tears of gratitude in her eyes. Thank you, Maya. You and your daddy saved my life in more ways than you'll ever know. David shook Lisa's hand, but she surprised him by giving him a respectful hug instead. Mr. Williams, I promise I'll spend the rest of my life making sure your faith in me wasn't misplaced. As David and Maya walked off the plane and into the bustling New York airport, Maya skipped ahead before turning back to her father. Daddy, I think that was a happy ending, don't you? David smiled, watching his daughter's innocent joy. Yes, baby girl. I think it was a very happy ending. But more importantly, it was a new beginning for everyone involved. Behind them, Lisa watched from the plane's doorway, ready to welcome the next group of passengers with the same warmth and respect she had learned to show everyone. The cycle of kindness that had started with David's decision to choose grace over revenge continued to ripple outward, touching lives in ways they might never fully know. Sometimes, the most powerful changes begin with the smallest acts of compassion.